Hey, good morning and happy Friday. If you've forgotten it's Friday, it is Friday. I don't have a clue what the date is. And this is the Daily Link where we take a break from our day to make sure we don't take a break from our faith. But I have no clue what episode this is because I lost count. So, anyway, I guess it doesn't matter. We are here every day, not because we are trying to rake in points in the kingdom, but because this is where we want to be. We want to be opening our eyes and our ears and our hearts towards the Lord. I have a few different passages I want to share with you today. Kind of coming out of a couple days ago, we did a kind of a prolonged, unscripted, just not season, but session where we just spent some time worshiping and praying. If you haven't seen that and you just need a little bit of time to spend before the Lord, there is a very unpolished video, a couple clicks back on your Facebook page or YouTube. But a couple of the passages I just want to spend some time taking a little bit more time going through, and where I want to start is really in the book of Galatians, Galatians 2:20. I guess I don't need to look it up. Galatians 2:20. Paul says, "For I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me." And I just want you to let that sit in for a minute. That Paul describes his Christian life as crucifixion. That's very contrary to the way that we oftentimes want to describe our Christian life. Now, the Christian life is a paradox because there's tremendous joy, there's happiness, there's there's hope, but there is crucifixion in the Christian life. And Paul nails it there. And I guess what I want us to do is just kind of meditate on what part of our life does this crucifixion really take hold of us. And I want you to turn back with me to this story in Acts chapter 16. It's a story of Paul and Silas. They ultimately end up in prison. But I want to take some time and actually go through that story with you. We'll take a couple sessions here to do so. We're not even going to get to prison yet today. But I want to just start reading with you. This is Acts chapter 16, and we're going to start at verse 14 in the conversion of Lydia. But it says, now Paul had just finally, Paul's on his missionary journeys, and he had actually just broken into Europe. So he's gone north, and he is beginning a whole new mission field here. He says, a woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, however you say that. She was a seller of purple fabrics, and she was a worshiper of God, and she was listening to Paul. And the Lord opened her heart to respond to the things spoken to her by Paul. And when she and her household had been baptized, she urged these men, saying, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and stay. And she prevailed upon them. So Paul comes into Europe, and Paul's custom was that he would first go to the people of God. He would first go to resident Jews, practicing Jews that lived in the area. He would go to the synagogues. He would go to the people that had a general understanding of Jewish heritage, who believed in the one true God. He didn't usually just go in and jump into the Greek or the Roman philosophy, the thoughts, the Gnosticism. He would go to the God-fearing people first to try to create to establish some traction, and revealing really to the people that had a heart of God first. And that's kind of my heart right now, as I feel like in the turmoil of everything going on, where do we start? We start in the household of God. We start by appealing to the people of God for peace and for wisdom and for maturity in these situations, right? But it says, it happened that as we were going to the place of prayer, a slave girl, having a spirit of divination, met us, who was bringing her masters much profit by her fortune-telling. And following after Paul and us, she kept crying out, saying, these men are bondservants of the Most High God, who are proclaiming to you the way of salvation. And she continued doing this for many days. And Paul was greatly annoyed, and he turned and he said to the spirit, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And it came out at that very moment. As I think about this slave girl, Paul says, first of all, it says that when Paul was there, he was heading daily to the place of prayer. And again, that's another thing I just want you to let sink in for a minute. He wasn't heading to the place of religion. He wasn't heading to the place of exchanging ideas. He wasn't heading to the coffee shop. He was, as when Luke thinks about and reflects on what Paul was doing and where Paul was spending his time, he says that Paul was daily going to the place in which they would pray. As they sought for the Spirit of God to take hold in a completely different continent, as they stepped foot in Europe, they were going daily to the place of prayer, not to the marketplace, not to the public forum, but to the place of prayer. And as they were going, it says that there is a slave girl who came and began to oppose them and did so through mockery. She wasn't giving Paul the advertising that he wanted. She was mocking him. Ooh, it's the people of salvation. They're going to tell you how to get to Jesus. They're going to tell you the true way of life, right? She was mocking them. And for the, mockery is probably the easiest and most pathetic form of opposition anybody can do, because everything can be scrutinized. Everything can be scrutinized. But anyway, the slave girl, she begins to mock him, and it's really unclear whether this slave girl was doing this because that was what she wanted to do, or whether that was what she was told what to do. So this was a woman who was given a demonic possession that gave her the ability to be a seer, to be able to fortune tell. And so when you look at the lot of this woman's life, I want you to think about the layers of oppression that she was in, because not only was she a woman in a patriarchal society, she was also owned by people because she was a slave, and beyond that, she was possessed by a demon. So this is perhaps the most powerless person that you have ever seen. Yet she parades herself as having great power because of the demonic forces that are flowing through her. Yet she herself has little power. And like I said, whether she was commanded by the people of the city or her owners to do this, or whether she was doing it of her own volition, we do not know, because she was a slave. But her opposition came against Paul, and it began to really wear on him. And I really like the New American Standard version. You guys know that I teach at the New American Standard, but I really am annoyed with their translation of annoyed here, because I just think that that's the wrong word. The King James uses a better word. It uses the word grieved. But if you look into the Greek in this, and I can't even begin to say the Greek name of it, but this word annoyed, when Paul became annoyed, or Paul became grieved, as the King James more rightly says, it's talking about, it's a word that says to work through with great labor, right? To bring something to completion with great labor. There's a strenuous work that is being done. So now think about this. Paul is heading daily to the place of prayer, and this woman is coming against him, okay? And it says he's working through with great labor. And I want to make a jump here that I don't know if anybody else has made. I haven't, quite frankly, looked. And if you don't like this jump, then disregard it. I still think my point's going to be valid at the end of the day. But I don't wonder if what Paul was working through as he went daily and he was being mocked by this slave, or being mocked by this demon, was working up the proper heart to be able to intercede for her and to set her free. That when she was coming against him, one of my questions is, why doesn't Paul just cast this demon out on day one, right? Why does he take day after day after day? It says after several days, right, this was going on before Paul actually did something. Why? Because I think there was a work that Paul had to do in his own heart to set his own heart straight, so that the prayer in which he spoke over her, the word of authority which he spoke into her life, would actually have the authority of God. In other words, I think Paul had to wrestle with his own fleshly response. I have been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. And his initial response to her, I wonder Don't know, speculating here, but if I wonder if it took him days of working through his own heart in prayer before God before he could pray over her and pray over her effectively. Several weeks ago, just as a moment of transparency or honesty with you, I was slightly frustrated. And we're all frustrated, right? We're frustrated from the top to the bottom with everything going on. And um, and this was before the protests, the riots, the killing, things that were going on there. So this is more coronavirus related, the shutdown related. But I told Sheila, I said, I don't know how to pray, and I'm speaking specifically of certain political leaders. Okay, I told her I just don't know how to pray for these people in love. There was no love in me for these people. I says I don't know how to pray for them because I I have no love, and that was a place for me where it's like the last thing that I know that I should do is speak out about them publicly or against them or even speak to them until I have a place and a heart of love. The Spirit of God flows through love. That's a jewel that you can put in your quiver, or an arrow you can put in your quiver for the rest of your life. This is the reality. The Spirit of God speaks in love, and Jesus always spoke in love, whether it was the woes to the religious leaders of the day or the woman who was caught in adultery. Jesus always spoke in love. And it may have been a word of rebuke or it may have been a word of grace or mercy, but it was always given in love. And I was at a place where I just had no love. All I had was anger and resentment and upset, and I was just upset. And it takes labor and work. It takes going to the Lord in prayer to work on myself so that I can put myself in a place in the Spirit where my prayers begin to have authority. And as I read as I read deeper into this and understand what Paul is going through here, I believe to a degree, is that Paul had to work through his own issues. And when he did, right, when he could speak over this woman with what God wanted for her began to take root, and it set her free. We have an example of this also in Matthew chapter 17. The disciples are trying to cast out a demon, and they're unable to cast out this demon, right? And Jesus says, bring the child over here, and brings the child over, and Jesus casts out the demon. And later on, the disciples ask, they say, why were we not able to cast out this demon? And Jesus says, well, this kind of demon only comes out through prayer and through fasting. Well, Jesus didn't pray and fast. What do you have, a 30-second fast? Like, he didn't do it at that moment, but what he was talking about was he had spent time with his heavenly Father. His heart was right in the situation, and he could see the person for who they were. He could see the oppressed for who they were underneath the oppression and speak to what God wanted for them and for their future. And in the midst of everything going on right now, I feel that the love of God is being pushed aside and the anger of man is being risen to the top. And we're losing our place, we're losing our voice as the church because we're really not acting in love. And what it requires from us is to step back and to labor through a place. And I'm not saying you have to agree with people. I hope not, because I don't agree with a lot of people. I'm not saying you have to agree, but we have to get ourselves to the place where we love, and we love well. And so with that, I just want to leave you with this final passage. We're going to pick up again tomorrow, talking about Paul and Silas's enslavement. But Paul says this, and Paul has the authority to say this because of what he has been through at the hands of political leaders and community leaders and others, right? 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1. First of all, not second, third, fourth, or fifth. First of all, I urge you that entreaties and prayers and petitions and thanksgivings be made on behalf of all men, for kings and all who are in authority, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and in all dignity. And so my challenge for you today, I want you to think of the person that, I don't want to say despise, it's a pretty hard word, but the person that you struggle to love with the love of God the most. And start there. Maybe it's a political person, maybe it's a family member, I don't know. But start there and begin to do that laborious work to work through. Lord, show me how you love this person and teach me how to pray for them as Jesus would pray for them if he were in my shoes. All right, guys, I love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll continue our story. Lord bless.